Welcome back to our deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different. We're not just looking at a text. We are basically stepping into a time machine.
Oh, I like that. A time machine to where?
I want you to mentally transport yourself. It's late, a Wednesday night, roughly 9 p.m.,
Okay.
and the date is March 13, 1968.
Wow. Okay, so a pretty turbulent year in the outside world, right? I mean, Vietnam, protests, political upheaval.
Exactly. But inside the room we're visiting, the atmosphere is incredibly focused. It's quiet, very intimate.
We're talking about a living room in Elmira, New York.
Right. It's quiet, dimly lit, maybe the smell of a cigarette burning in an ashtray. And we're observing a husband and wife, Ruburt Butts and Jane Roberts.
But the air in the room is heavy.
Yeah, because there's a third presence involved. We're looking at a pivotal moment in the Seth Material. Specifically, we're diving into session 399 from the early sessions, book 8.
Which is just for anyone who tracks the history of consciousness research or even just, weird history. This specific date, March 13, 1968, it marks a huge turning point.
It really does.
It's the moment where the sort of spooky aspect of channeling starts to merge with the practical biological reality of the people doing it. It's less of a ghost story and much more about energy mechanics.
Before we unpack the strange and frankly profound details of this session, which, by the way, covers everything from curing the common cold to the nature of reincarnational destiny, we should be clear about our mission today.
Right, our parameters.
We're taking this single transcript, session 399, and extracting the psychological and metaphysical mechanics at play. We're going to chill, hang out in 1968 for a bit, and see what we can learn.
Exactly. We aren't just recounting a seance here. We are looking at how a massive creative energy actually integrates into a very mundane life. I mean, how do you pay the bills and cure your sniffles while you're channeling a multidimensional entity?
And a quick housekeeping note before we really get into it. This podcast is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. Our source text today is the early sessions, book 8, and all credit for this incredible material belongs to the Seth Material and the publisher, New Awareness Network.
And we cannot stress this enough. We are just looking at a map here today.
Yeah.
If you want to walk the territory yourself, you need to study the Seth Material books directly.
Absolutely.
You can visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcenter.com for the early sessions.
It's really the only way to get the unadulterated data. We are just your guides. So let's look at Jane Roberts on this Wednesday night. Usually when we think of mediumship, especially from the mid-20th century, there's a very specific image that comes to mind.
The sleeping prophet archetype.
Yeah, exactly. Someone slumped in a chair, unconscious, maybe muttering while their eyes are rolled back in their head. Total dissociation.
Right. The idea being that the self has to completely leave the building for the spirit to enter.
Right. But session 399 opens with a detail that completely disrupts that narrative. The notes from Ruburt Butts, they explicitly state that Jane began speaking in a very quiet voice, but actively and crucially with her eyes open.
Eyes open. It seems like a minor physiological detail, but in this specific context, it represents a massive shift in the interface between Jane and Seth.
So why is that such a big deal? I mean, why does it matter if her eyelids are up or down?
Think about it as a hardware upgrade. Eyes closed implies the ego has to be knocked out cold for the information to come through, like the conscious mind is a barrier that has to be removed.
Right.
Eyes open implies integration. It suggests that Jane, or Ruburt, as Seth calls her, is learning to accommodate this massive energy while remaining totally present in the physical room. She's looking at Robert, she's seeing the room, she's there.
And Seth comments on this immediately in the transcript.
Yeah.
He notes that Ruburt is finally feeling his presence immediately before the session starts. The lag time is gone.
It's the difference between dial-up internet and fiber optic. The connection is becoming always on. It signifies that Jane's personality and Seth's personality are finding a way to coexist without one obliterating the other.
I love that analogy. Dial up to fiber optic. And what's really fascinating is that with this high-fidelity connection established, Seth doesn't immediately launch into the secrets of the galaxy.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't start with the origin of the universe. He starts with something incredibly mundane, the sniffles.
It is so grounding, isn't it? You have an entity that supposedly transcends time and space, and the first order of business is, let's talk about your cold symptoms.
It makes it feel so real, like, hey, I have cosmic wisdom to drop, but first, do you have a tissue?
Yeah.
But he's not just being polite, is he?
No, not at all. He isn't prescribing vitamin C here. He links their physical symptoms directly to their inner attitude.
Right.
He tells them, quote, "Your own lingering symptoms will disappear as Rupert's lingering symptoms disappear." He is establishing a direct link between their psychological state and their metabolic reality.
And that's a huge insight for the listener. Seth is positing that high-level creative work, or psychic work, isn't just a mental activity. It's highly biological. It costs calories. It uses the nervous system.
Precisely. He actually mentions a noticeable additional energy available to you both. This implies that the symptoms were a result of resistance.
Like a kinked hose.
Exactly. If you kink a garden hose, the pressure builds up and it might burst a leak. That leak is the illness. They were blocking the flow of this intense creative energy, and that blockage manifested as a cold or fatigue.
And now that the resistance is dropping, which we see evidenced by the eyes open trance state, the hose is unkinked.
The energy that was making them sick is now available as vitality. It's a fundamental metabolic shift. Seth says it will help them in all of their projects.
He's basically telling them that by clearing the psychological blockage, they are literally freeing up biological resources to do their art, their writing, and just their living.
It reframes illness. It's not just an attack from the outside like a germ jumping on you, but a mismanagement of internal energy.
Which connects right back to the core Seth principle. You create your own reality, even your biological reality.
Exactly.
I think a lot of us would pay good money for that kind of energy drink. One that clears the sinuses and connects you to multidimensional wisdom.
Seth's cosmic cleanse.
Yeah.
I really don't think that's FDA approved.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But speaking of paying money, that brings us to the next major stressor Seth tackles in this session. And this is something literally everyone listening can relate to: financial survival.
This is where the session gets strikingly pragmatic. You have to remember the historical context. Jane and Robert were artists living in the late 60s.
Right. They were pretty bohemian.
Very. They didn't have 401ks. They were writing and painting, and making rent was always a concern.
And anxiety is a signal killer. It's really hard to be profoundly psychic when you're worried about the electric bill being paid.
It is the ultimate distortion. If you are in a state of survival panic, that fight or flight mode, your brain simply cannot tune into subtle frequencies. Seth knows this. He knows that for them to do this work effectively, they need to feel safe. So he makes a prediction that is incredibly bold.
He effectively says, relax. The money is solved.
He even gives a timeline. He says it will help you financially also after the period of 6 months approximately. He claims that events have already been set in motion that will ensure they have no more financial worries.
No more financial worries. That is the phrase that jumps out. It's the artist's dream. Really, it's the human dream. But he uses a metaphor that I really love. He says, your pockets will always be filled.
It evokes a sense of continuous flow rather than hoarding wealth. It's not about having $1 million sitting in a bank account. It's about having exactly what you need, exactly when you need it.
Yes.
But you have to notice the dry humor Seth employs right after making that huge promise. He completely anticipates their reaction.
Yeah, he says, now the immediate effects of the cold cash will not then be in your pocket.
He knows human nature so well. He knows Robert is probably going to immediately reach down and check his wallet.
He's saying, don't check your wallet right this second. The check is in the cosmic mail.
Right. But ask yourself, why does a non-physical entity even care about their bank account? It goes back to that idea of removing the distortion. Seth explicitly states, there is no distortion here.
He's trying to get them to a place of absolute trust.
Exactly. If they can trust him on the metaphysics, on the nature of the soul, and the structure of the universe, they have to be able to trust him on the material physics too.
It's about buying freedom. The money isn't for buying a yacht. It's for buying the time and the mental space to continue the work without the static noise of how do we survive tomorrow.
It's the hierarchy of needs playing out in real time. Seth is trying to stabilize their base reality so they can build the higher conceptual structures of the material. He is asking them to completely surrender their survival anxiety.
Which requires an immense amount of trust. Imagine a voice in your head telling you, hey, don't worry about the rent. Do you actually listen? Or do you panic anyway?
Which is exactly why that inner attitude work from the first section was so vital. If they hadn't cleared the physical blockages, they wouldn't be able to accept the financial reassurance.
Which leads us directly to the mechanism of how they're going to achieve this work. Because this is, for me anyway, the most technical and fascinating part of session 399.
The Gestalt.
Yes, the concept of the Gestalt.
This is really the core operating system of the entire Seth Material. If you understand this, you understand the engine driving everything.
Because usually we think of channeling as a solo sport. One person the medium, is doing the heavy lifting. The other person in the room is just the scribe, the secretary taking notes. But Seth completely dismantles that view here.
He absolutely does. He explains that while Jane and Robert are distinct individuals with their own egos and histories, when they come together for this specific work, 1 + 1 does not equal 2. It equals 3.
He says, quote, "You two form a gestalt, so that working together you have more knowledge, ability, and information than you have separately."
Think of it like a chemical reaction. Oxygen and hydrogen are gases. You put them together and you get water. Something completely different in nature, with entirely different properties. Seth is saying that the Seth phenomenon is, in a very real part, a product of the combined energy field of Jane and Robert.
So Robert, who is referred to as Joseph in the texts, he isn't just a passive observer. He isn't just some guy holding a pen in the corner. He's an active component of the circuit.
He is the ground wire and the amplifier. Seth admits that he comes through better because of Robert's support and encouragement. Without Robert's specific energy frequency stabilizing Jane, the signal might not be as clear, it might not even be possible.
That redefines the power dynamic entirely. It's not that Jane is special and Robert is just lucky to be in the room. It's that this phenomenon requires this specific pairing.
It's a symbiotic psychic relationship. And Seth actually pushes them to use this third energy for more than just the dictation sessions. He suggests joint creative endeavors and even joint attempts at projection.
Meaning out-of-body experiences?
Yes.
That is a wild suggestion for a married couple on a Wednesday night. Like, hey, honey, instead of watching TV tonight, let's project our consciousness into the astral plane.
Do you want to fly to Paris via the Astral or United Airlines?
Right.
But the underlying logic is incredibly sound. Jane had a lot of fear regarding psychic states. Fear of losing control, fear of the unknown. Seth is saying that Robert acts as her tether. Knowing his energy is with her reduces that fear, which allows them to go much deeper than she ever could alone.
It creates a psychological safety net.
Exactly. Where two or more are gathered. Right, it's an ancient concept. The collective energy is exponentially stronger than the individual.
It really makes you think about the gestalts in our own lives. We often think of our relationships purely as social or romantic connections, but we rarely think of them as energetic batteries that create a third entity.
And that is a huge takeaway for the listener. Who amplifies your signal? Who is the person that, when you are with them, allows you to access more knowledge and ability than you have when you're alone? That person is your Gestalt partner.
It's the difference between a friend who just drains you and a friend who makes you feel like you can conquer the world. That conquer the world feeling is the Gestalt energy.
Precisely. And according to this session, this specific partnership between Jane and Robert wasn't just some happy accident. They didn't just randomly bump into each other.
Which brings us to the section on destiny. And honestly, this part gave me chills when I was rereading it.
The timeline gets very heavy here. Seth drops the concept of the last reincarnation.
Last reincarnation. In metaphysical terms, that is a massive statement to make. It implies they are seniors in the school of Earth, they are finishing the curriculum, they aren't coming back.
He says, quote, "You both have individual and yet joint purposes in this your last reincarnation." It makes it sound like a movie script that was written long before they were ever born, like they were sent here specifically to do this work.
It definitely implies a pre-birth contract. But Seth is very nuanced here. He isn't a fatalist. He doesn't believe everything is just locked in stone and unavoidable.
Right. He adds a very important disclaimer about free will. He says, this does not mean that you would automatically do so. You had free choice in the matter.
So they could have completely messed it up. They could have missed the boat.
Absolutely. He mentions there were many roads they could have taken where they never met Seth, never did the work, and presumably would have had to return for another life to try it all again.
That is kind of terrifying to think about. Imagine a timeline where Jane Roberts just writes some mediocre poetry, Robert paints some landscapes, they never sit down at the Ouija board, and this entire body of philosophy is just lost. We wouldn't be having this deep dive right now.
It's the sliding doors moment of metaphysics, and Seth uses a really powerful metaphor for this probability. He calls their past development a fuse.
He says, quote, "The two of you from past development and association were a fuse. Whether or not the spark was to be lit was up to you."
The fuse was laid down through generations of karma, meeting each other, cultivating their interests. But they still had to be the ones to strike the match in 1963 when they started.
And Seth notes that Jane actually tried to blow the match out at one point.
She did. He says she fearfully tried to close it down. And that is such a deeply human reaction to the sublime. When we are confronted with something huge, something that totally challenges our reality, we instinctively recoil. We just want to go back to normal.
But they didn't close it down. They let it burn. And because they did, Seth makes a prediction about their legacy that, sitting here today, we can actually verify.
He predicts a movement. Now, usually when people hear the word movement in a spiritual context, they immediately think of a cult. They think of leaders, followers, compounds, robes.
But Seth cuts that assumption off immediately. He defines the movement very specifically.
He says, quote, "The movement will be the material."
And he adds, individual men will recognize its truth. It's entirely decentralized. It's about the information itself, not the messenger.
That is a crucial distinction. It's an intellectual and spiritual movement based purely on ideas, not hierarchy. And remarkably, he predicts Ruburt's future role with uncanny accuracy in this session.
Yeah, he tells Ruburt, you will spend later years lecturing in various cities, and your own artwork will be fulfilled.
And for anyone who doesn't know the history after Jane passed away in 1984, that is exactly what Ruburt Butts did. He spent decades organizing the books, writing the introductions, answering letters, and engaging with the readers. He fulfilled that contract to the letter.
It validates that time travel feeling we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
We're seeing the roadmap of a life laid out in 1968 that was walked perfectly until the early 2000s. It's spooky, but in a really comforting way. It implies that there is a plan, even if we have to choose to follow it.
But there's another aspect of their lives that Seth addresses in this session, and it's a pretty sensitive one. It's about children.
Yeah, this is a real deep dive moment for sure. We have to look at the context of 1968. What was the societal expectation for a married couple then?
You get married, you buy a house, you have children. That was the script. If you didn't have kids, people generally assumed something was physically or psychologically wrong with you.
And Jane and Ruburt didn't have kids. And Seth addresses the elephant in the room directly. He says, quote, neither of you sexually want children.
It's a very blunt assessment, but he doesn't frame it as a biological failure or a selfish choice at all. He doesn't say, you hate kids. He frames it as a transmutation of energy.
Explain that transmutation a bit more, because this is a fascinating concept.
Well, Seth validates their relationship as sexually strong and a blessing, so they aren't celibate monks. But he says their main energy is directed elsewhere. In many esoteric traditions, if you think of Kundalini yoga, for example, sexual energy is viewed as raw creative fuel. It is the fundamental life force.
Right.
You can use that fuel to create biological life babies down at the lower chakras, or you can raise that energy up to the higher centers, the throat for communication, the third eye for insight, to create intellectual or spiritual life.
So he's saying they are taking the exact same energy that would have gone into raising a family, the nurturing, the late nights, the creation, the legacy, and funneling it entirely into the books.
Exactly. He says the primary purpose now is to leave behind your work, paintings, and writings in my communications. Those are their children.
He even uses the term bisexual to describe their bond, but not in the modern sexual orientation sense, right?
Right, he means bisexual in the overall sense. He explains that because they have known each other in so many past lives, continuously swapping roles, sometimes he was the husband, sometimes she was, or they were brother and sister, their current union contains the energy of both sexes within it. They are a complete self-contained unit.
So they don't need offspring to complete the family unit because the two of them are the family spanning across centuries.
Exactly. It's a profound reframing for anyone listening who is child-free, whether by choice or by circumstance. The legacy doesn't have to be genetic. It can be mimetic. It can be ideas.
Seth defines their offspring as messages from other dimensions, telling man of his own nature. One could definitely argue that those children, those books, have had a far greater impact on the evolution of consciousness than a biological lineage ever might have.
I mean, we are still analyzing them in incredible detail decades later. That's a pretty strong legacy to leave behind.
Definitely. Now, we need to shift gears here because despite all this incredibly heavy talk of destiny and cosmic mechanics and transmuting life force, Seth is also very funny.
He really is. He has a distinct personality.
And he is very protective of Jane's personality, too.
This is one of the most charming parts of the entire session. It really humanizes the whole process. Jen had a secret fear about all of this.
What was she so afraid of?
She was worried that becoming a channel meant she had to become a saint. She thought she had to give up the cigarettes, the beer, the loud arguments, the poetry. She thought she had to become holy and serious.
And Seth calls this out directly. He says, quote, He, referring to Jane, is not going to give up fun and become a long-faced spiritual fogey. Even I am not that.
A long-faced spiritual fogey. It's such a great burn. It perfectly evokes that image of the overly serious, whispering guru who has completely forgotten how to laugh.
And Jane was the absolute antithesis of that. She was fiery, she was alive, she was a total firecracker.
And Seth is validating that aliveness. He is explicitly saying that spiritual connection doesn't require you to dampen your humanity. In fact, the fun is a crucial part of the energy flow. If you are miserable and ascetic, you are probably blocking the energy again.
It reminds me of that old saying that angels can fly because they take themselves lightly.
That's perfect. Joy is a high frequency. Being a fogey is a form of energetic constriction. Seth wants her to be loose, relaxed, and happy. That actually makes the channel clearer.
So the moral of the story is, keep the beer, keep the fun. You can still be highly spiritual.
Within reason, of course. But yes, do not kill the joy to try and find God.
But speaking of Jane's transformation, towards the end of the session, the human side gets a little spooky again. We talked about her eyes being open at the start, but Ruburt notices something else during one of their breaks.
Yes. This is where the physical reality of the channeling really gets weird. Jane reports feeling like she is in a half-and-half world. She says she feels more and more like Seth and less like Jane.
And Ruburt looks at her face and sees a physical change. He writes in his notes that the set of her mouth and chin looked, quote, older, not quite like the set I am used to.
In the history of mediumship, this is called transfiguration. It's the phenomenon where the medium's physical features actually seem to morph to resemble the spirit they are channeling.
That is the stuff of horror movies. Like literally changing faces.
It can definitely be unsettling. But look at how Ruburt handles it. He doesn't run screaming from the living room. He remains a grounded, objective observer. He speculates in his notes that it wasn't a literal physical transmigration of flesh, her bones weren't magically moving, but rather Jane's emotional appreciation of the personality that was changing her muscular set.
Kind of like when you hang out with a close friend so much, you start mimicking their facial expressions unconsciously.
Exactly. Or think of a deep method actor who inhabits a role so fully they become unrecognizable, even without any makeup. It shows just how deep the integration was going. Jane wasn't just repeating words she heard in her head. She was feeling the underlying personality structure of Seth. She was letting him try on her face, essentially.
It's a huge testament to how eyes open and present she was. She was fluid enough to let that happen without panicking.
And this brings us back around to the community aspect we touched on. Seth mentions briefly that he has been coming through in Jane's ESP classes.
Right, she was actively teaching classes at this time in Elmira.
This is the final piece of the puzzle. The gestalt isn't just limited to the couple, it extends to the class. Seth notes that the students, quote, set up a supportive psychic atmosphere that adds to Ruburt's well-being.
So even a multidimensional entity needs a good hype man or a supportive audience.
It confirms that this work isn't done in a vacuum. The energy of the observers actually helps hold the space. It grounds the frequency. It takes a village to channel a ghost, apparently.
So if we step back and look at session 399 as a whole, what is the grand synthesis here? We have health, we have cold cash, 1 + 1 = 3 relationships, ultimate destiny, no kids, and a face-changing channeler.
If I had to summarize the entire session in one word, it would be integration.
Integration. Unpack that for us.
This session is entirely about taking the high-voltage energy of the spiritual realm and wiring it safely into the house of the physical realm. It's saying that your bank account, your sinus infection, your marriage, and your laughter are not separate from your spiritual path. They are the path.
You don't leave your body to find enlightenment. You clear the blockages in your body to let the enlightenment in.
And you find the partners, the gestalts, who help you turn up that voltage safely. You fix the money so you can fix the mind. You fix the mind so you can fix the body. It is all one interconnected system.
That brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, today. We want you to look at your own life through the lens of session 399.
We want you to ask yourself, who is your Joseph? Who is the person with whom you create a third energy that is massively greater than the sum of its parts?
And conversely, look at your lingering symptoms, whether they are physical ailments, creative blocks, or financial struggles. Ask yourself, are these purely bad luck? Or are they evidence of a massive creative intuition that you're actively trying to block?
Are you, like Jane once did, trying to blow out the match because you're terrified of the fire?
That is the uncomfortable question to sit with. And look, We have barely scratched the surface of what is contained in this material. We are giving you the highlights, but the true depth is in the books themselves.
We strongly encourage you to study the Seth material directly. Please, don't just take our word for it. Go to the original source.
You can find the specific text we discussed today, the Early Sessions Book 8, and the rest of the incredible library at the New Awareness Network website. That is sethcenter.com/early sessions.
There really is no substitute for reading the original transcripts. The energy is encoded right there in the words.
A huge thank you to the New Awareness Network for keeping this movement alive and keeping the books in print, exactly as Seth predicted back in 1968.
Indeed. The legacy absolutely continues.
Well, that concludes our time travel trip to Elmira. I think I'm going to go work on my inner attitude and see if I can manifest some filled pockets before tomorrow.
Good luck with that. And don't forget to keep the fun while you do it.
I won't be a spiritual fogey, I promise. Until the next deep dive, keep your eyes open.
See you there.